So let's start with assembling our jacket. Let's get that started. I'm going to start with the back jacket pieces. Here we are, 2 back jacket pieces, right side up, because I can't see any of my dart excess. I want to sew my center back seam together, so I'm going to take one side, place it on top of the other, right sides together. And I'm going to pin and sew along this center back seam all the way down to the hem. This will be a 1/2 inch seam allowance, number 2 stitch, back tack at the beginning, back tack at the end. Press that seam open when this is done. Backs are sewn together. Here is my seam from the inside, 1/2 inch seam allowance, seam pressed open with my serge stitching. Now that this is put together, there's a little bit more work we need to do on the backs. Our back shoulder seams are longer than our front shoulder seams. This also has to do with curving over the ball, not the ball of the shoulder, but it has to do with curving over the shoulder and shoulder blade. So the back shoulder seams are 1/2 inch longer than our front shoulder seams. So in order to make the back shoulder seam fit to the front, we're going to put E-stitches in again. So 3/8 of an inch from the raw edge. Place number 4 stitches along your shoulder seams on both sides. 3/8 of an inch. Number 4 stitches, no back tacking, leave tails at the beginning and the end. I'll be right back with that. Okay, so we've been putting these E-stitches, these number 4 stitches, all over our garment. We've put them into the sleeve cap. Now we've put it into the back shoulder seams. Let's take a look at how we're going to use these number 4 stitches. Please be careful. I'm just trimming my serge stitching, but I don't want to clip the tails that I just left on my E-stitches. So here are my E-stitches here on the back shoulder. There we go. Got thread tails on either side. Same thing here. Thread tails on either side. So let's get our front jacket piece. I'm just going to grab one of these. Now I've got the right side of my jacket face up. My back is face up. I'm going to place my front face down. And I want to see which side does this attach to. This looks pretty good. My shoulder seams are matching up. My side seams are matching up. If I try to attach this over here, it's not going to work. Not going to work. Remember, right sides together. Let me trim my serge stitching here. And I'm going to line up my shoulder seams. Zoom in here a little bit. I'll show you how we start to utilize these E-stitches. So I've got my tails here for my E-stitches. I'm going to line up my armhole. Raw edges matching along there. Pin this in place. And then you can see there's that extra 1/2 inch from the back shoulder. I'm going to match up my neckline so that these raw edges are flush. Pin that in place. Now we're going to have some gapping here on the back. Take one end of your tails, take both of them. It should be a top and a bobbin thread. I'm going to hold both threads together. Let me zoom in a little bit more here. Holding both threads, I'm going to wrap it under my pin, just wrapping it underneath my pin. I'm going underneath the tip of my pin, and again, I'll come up and around. You can do a figure 8. You can just keep wrapping it under and under and under. There it goes underneath the tip, underneath the head of the pin. You can also do a figure 8 if you prefer. That's just going to anchor our threads over there on that side. I'm going to go over to the other side here, where I've got my other 2 thread tails. And I'm just going to isolate one of them. Doesn't matter which one. There's going to be a top thread and a bobbin thread. Doesn't matter which one you use. Don't pull on both at the same time though, because it won't work. I'm going to separate these threads. I've got 2 different threads. I'm just going to hold on to one of them. Just going to pick one. And as you saw before, I'm going to hold on to this thread here. I'm going to pinch my fabric. I'm going to pull on that thread. And at the same time, I'm going to slide my fabric across. This is going to take some practice if you've never done this before. And you can start to see my back fabric is starting to gather up there. I'm going to just pinch my back fabric. You're doing a pull in this direction to the right and a pull to the left. So you're sliding the fabric while holding the thread taut in one hand. So I'm holding my thread with my right hand and I'm sliding my fabric along that thread. Be careful, be gentle with this. Depending on what kind of fabric you have, what kind of tension was on your sewing machine, you can run the risk of popping these E-stitches. That thread can snap, and if it does, you got to go back to the machine and stitch it again. So now I've got some gathers along the back of my shoulder. Now this is way too much gathering. This is too much for this seam. We're not making a gathered shoulder seam. So, and you can see now my back is shorter than my front. So now I need to slowly ease out. I'm just kind of pulling that extra fabric, smoothing it out as I go, and slowly smoothing it along these threads. I already have it anchored over here, so I can't really smooth it in that direction. I need to smooth it back this way. Sliding that fabric back along that thread. And the amount of gathers you're going to get is going to be minimal. You can still see I've got a gap from my front, between my back and my front. So I'm going to smooth it a little bit more. This will be minimal. You can give these a bit of a tug until that gap disappears. I'm pretty happy with that. And you can see it's a minimal amount of gathers that have occurred. And if you sew over this, you're not going to get any puckers or anything like that. It's just enough to take in a little bit of fullness. Matching up my raw edges. And I'm going to pin these together before I lose all that ease. Now, if you have a slippery kind of fabric and you can see that this is wanting to slip slide away from you, all that ease pulling that you did, all that work you just did to balance that out, you can take the two thread tails over here and then wrap those around this other pin to anchor it in place so that you don't lose that work. I'm going to pin these in place. And I'll show you that one more time on the other side here. So that one's ready to go. Let's take care of this one. Here is my front jacket piece, right side down. Match up my shoulder seams, make sure my side seams are in the right orientation, armholes are in the correct place, looking good. Match up my armhole seam allowance, so let me trim my serge stitching. Okay. Match up my armholes and pin on this side. Oops. Match up my necklines. This raw edge here. And pin that. There we go. Those two ends are pinned. There's that gap. My back is too long, longer than my front. So I'm going to anchor my ease pins, my ease stitches. Where's my threads? I've got one of them. Here's the other one. Here we go. These are my two ease threads, my thread tails. I'm gonna wrap them under my pin, under the head of the pin, under the tip of the pin, under, and just lock those threads into place. And then over here on the other side, I'm going to isolate one of these thread tails. Whichever one I like best. I'm just going to hold on to this, so here you go, there's two of them. I'm just going to grab one. Hold this in my right hand, hold it firmly, not too tight, just firm. And then I will slide, while I kind of tug in this direction, I'm going to slide my fabric along my threads. You may find this easier to do with certain types of fabrics. But again, I've accidentally grabbed both threads, both thread tails. It will not work when you're holding both thread tails. It's got to be just one. There we go. And I'll just gather that up. Now my front is too big. My back is not big enough. I'll smooth that back out, ease that back out. Very slowly, carefully distribute that gathering. Give it a little tug. Don't be too forceful with it or you'll snap the threads. It's looking a little bit better. I just want to distribute this a little bit. That's better. Okay, now I'll grab both threads and I will lock this down on this thread, on this needle pin, excuse me. It's looking a little bit better, a little bit closer. Line up the raw edges, pin this in place, and we will get to the machine and sew this seams, these seams. Now when I go to sew this, I will probably sew it with the back side facing up, so I make sure I don't get any puckers, or I don't want my fabric gathering up underneath itself. I want to make sure when I sew this it's going to be nice and smooth. I don't want any of my fabric kind of folding over on itself and getting caught in my seams, because that's going to cause a pucker. Okay, shoulder seams are pinned. Let's go sew them. Okay. 1/2 inch seam allowance, number 2 stitch, back tack at the beginning, back tack at the end. You can remove that anchor pin now that everything's kind of in place. You can let that, if you're finding it hard to get the very edge of the fabric into place because of those threads getting anchored to that pin, you can remove that pin. You should be sewing beside your ease stitches because we don't want to have to take those stitches out. And back tack at the end. Now that that is in place, you can clip any extra threads, any thread tails you might have. You can get rid of those. We don't need them anymore. As long as we don't have any puckers or anything. Still relatively smooth. This little bit of ease adds a little bit of fullness as it curves over the shoulder, the back of the shoulder. And I will sew my other seam over here. Let me pull this pin out so I can get my raw edges aligned. 1/2 inch seam allowance, number 2 stitch, back tack in, back tack at the beginning and the end. See, this has a potential to be a pucker. I'll just kind of smooth my fabric down and out of the way of the needle. And if you catch a pucker or something, you can just rip out that one little section of stitching and then re-sew it. No need to re-sew the entire seam. Okay, I'm going to take these to the iron and press these shoulder seams open. Okay, shoulder seams are in. Make sure you're checking after you've sewn your seam to make sure you're not getting any gathers, any puckers. Should still look smooth from the outside. If you do get a pucker, just take out those few stitches in that area, maybe about an inch of stitches, and then resew it. No need to have to resew the entire seam line. And those seams have been pressed open on the iron. So you can see where the back seams are. They've got a little bit of ripples because those have been eased in. So they're a little bit larger. And my ease stitches are still visible right in there. They're inside the seam allowance. No need to take them out. Can't see them from the outside, so who would ever know? Now that I've got my neckline connected, this should look similar to your facing piece because it's the exact same pattern. There's my back neckline and my front neckline. I'm going to stay stitch again because we have another curve. We're going to have to clip into this curve later. So from the shoulder to the notch or all the way to the point, it's fine. All the way to the lapel point, it's okay. 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, number 2 stitch, no back tacking, started from the shoulder, going all the way to the notch or to the lapel point. Again, shoulder to center front, shoulder to center back, and shoulder to center back. I'm going to go ahead and stay stitch that. And once I'm done stay stitching on the sewing machine, I'm going to put my work right sides together again. So I'll take care of the stay stitching. But while I'm there on the sewing machine, here's my back jacket pieces. I'm going to lay my front pieces on top, right sides together. Make sure those shoulder seams are nice and smooth. We don't want any twisting or anything going on there. So I'll stay stitch my neckline, and then I'm going to put my jacket right sides together and match up my side seams. Side seams should be aligned for front and back. I'll pin these side seams together, sew them at a 1/2 inch seam allowance, number 2 stitch, back tack at the beginning, back tack at the end, and then I will also press these seams open once those are sewn. We've got the start to a jacket. I have stay stitched my neckline. I've got some threads to clean up here. Neckline is stay stitched front and back. There we go. Side seams are sewn and pressed open on the inside here. There it is up in the armhole. Shoulder seam, armhole, side seam, all the way down to the hem. Same thing over here. Shoulder seam, armhole, side seam, pressed open. Make sure you're utilizing either the sleeve board or the tailor's ham to press these seams open because they are curved seams. The side seams cinch in at the waist. You can see it comes in and then it curves back out as it goes over the hips ever so slightly. So I use my tailor's ham to press those seams open. And that will take care of the body of our jacket. The last 2 things I want to take care of will be the sleeves. Sewing the sleeves together, getting those assembled and ready for installation, and sewing the collar together. So we'll take a look at that coming up.